On September 11, 2025, the world of international trade stands at a crossroads, facing a pivotal moment that could reshape the global economic landscape for years to come. The air is thick with uncertainty as markets brace for the impact of a bold and controversial move by the United States. President Trump, in a sweeping and highly publicized announcement, has introduced a new wave of tariffs that reach across nearly every sector of imported goods. These tariffs are not just a minor adjustment, they represent a dramatic escalation in the ongoing debate over trade, protectionism, and America's role in the global economy. At their core, tariffs are essentially a tax on imported goods. By making foreign products more expensive, the administration hopes to encourage American consumers and businesses to buy domestically produced items instead. The idea is to boost U.S. manufacturing, create jobs, and reduce the nation's reliance on overseas suppliers, but the reality is far more complex, with ripple effects that touch every corner of the economy, from the price of everyday goods on store shelves to the stability of international supply chains. The tariffs, first announced on April 2, 2025, set a baseline 10% tax on most imports entering the United States. However, the policy is far from uniform. Some countries, singled out for what the administration calls unfair trade practices, face tariffs as high as 50%. This aggressive stance has sent shockwaves through global markets, with trading partners scrambling to assess the impact and consider their own responses. For some nations, these tariffs represent a near insurmountable barrier to accessing the lucrative American market. Exporters are left scrambling to find alternative buyers, while U.S. importers must weigh the costs of passing higher prices on to consumers or absorbing the losses themselves. Perhaps most strikingly, even America's closest allies are not exempt. Canada and Mexico, long-standing partners in North American trade, now face tariffs of 25%, a move justified by the administration on the grounds of national security. This has strained diplomatic ties and raised questions about the future of regional cooperation. The scope of this policy is unprecedented. Nearly 70% of all U.S. imports are now subject to these new tariffs, marking a dramatic departure from previous administrations, which typically targeted specific industries or countries. The sheer breadth of the tariffs means that their effects will be felt not just by multinational corporations, but by small businesses and ordinary Americans alike. To implement this sweeping change, the Trump administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a rarely used law that allows the president to take extraordinary measures in times of national crisis. By bypassing Congress, the administration has ignited a fierce constitutional debate over the limits of executive power and the proper role of the legislative branch in shaping trade policy. Unlike previous tariffs, which were often targeted and temporary, these new measures represent a fundamental shift in the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches. Legal scholars and policymakers are now grappling with profound questions. Does the president have the authority to unilaterally reshape the nation's trade relationships? What checks and balances exist to prevent overreach? The Supreme Court has been thrust into the spotlight, tasked with resolving these constitutional questions. The justices must weigh the president's claims of emergency powers against the foundational principles of American democracy, knowing that their decision will set a precedent for generations to come. Meanwhile, the world watches with bated breath. Financial analysts, business leaders, and government officials across the globe are closely monitoring the situation, aware that the outcome will have far-reaching consequences for international trade, economic growth, and geopolitical stability. As the United States navigates this uncharted territory, the decisions made in Washington will not only redefine America's trade relationships, but also reshape the balance of power within the U.S. government itself. The world waits to see what the future holds. The Supreme Court is set to decide if the president can impose tariffs without Congress. This case challenges the balance of power, with states and businesses opposing the tariffs. They argue it's an overreach, while the administration cites emergency powers under IEPA. The court must interpret the Constitution's trade authority against the president's emergency powers. The decision will set a precedent, either limiting or expanding presidential power. The outcome will shape the future of U.S. economic policy and governance. The legal battle over tariffs quickly escalated to the Supreme Court. Initially, the Court of International Trade ruled against the tariffs, citing overreach. The administration appealed, arguing national security and foreign policy prerogatives. The Court of Appeals upheld the lower court, reinforcing Congress's trade authority. With 2 defeats, the administration turned to the Supreme Court for resolution. The expedited hearing underscores the tariff's economic impact and urgency. The global community awaits the Supreme Court's decisive ruling. If upheld, the tariffs will cement a new era of protectionism in U.S. trade policy. This could trigger retaliatory tariffs, escalating global trade tensions. The established global trade system would be undermined, leading to chaotic commerce. Businesses would face uncertainty, with disrupted supply chains and increased costs. A Supreme Court victory would expand presidential power, allowing unilateral economic actions. Future presidents could wield this power, making global trade unpredictable. The long-term effect would be a less stable and cooperative world economy. The decision will redefine international trade dynamics and U.S. economic influence. If the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs, global markets would breathe a collective sigh of relief. Investors and business leaders around the world would quickly react to the news, with stock markets likely surging as uncertainty fades. The removal of tariffs would signal a return to more predictable and stable trading conditions, encouraging companies to resume cross-border investments and long-term planning. For many, this decision would mark a turning point, restoring confidence in the international economic system, and reducing the risk of trade wars that could disrupt global growth. The ruling would reaffirm a rules-based international order, easing trade tensions that have simmered for years. By upholding the principles of fair and open trade, the Supreme Court would send a powerful message to the world. The United States remains committed to honoring its international agreements and respecting the frameworks that govern global commerce. This renewed commitment would help rebuild trust among trading partners, paving the way for new negotiations and collaborations that benefit all sides. The U.S. government would face a significant financial reckoning, potentially refunding up to $1 trillion in collected tariffs. This massive sum would require careful management, as it could impact federal budgets and spending priorities. Lawmakers and officials would need to navigate the complex process of issuing refunds to businesses and importers, while also considering the broader economic implications. The decision would spark debates about fiscal responsibility and the long-term effects on government revenue. For American companies, the end of tariffs would be a welcome relief. Manufacturers and retailers would see lower costs for imported materials and goods, allowing them to lower prices for consumers and invest in growth. This could help ease inflationary pressures, making everyday products more affordable for families across the country. As market stability returns, businesses would be better positioned to hire workers, expand operations, and contribute to a stronger economy. The decision would also strengthen multilateral trade agreements and institutions like the World Trade Organization. By demonstrating respect for international rules, the United States would encourage other nations to do the same, reinforcing the global system that supports fair competition and economic cooperation. This renewed faith in multilateralism could lead to new trade deals and a more resilient global economy. Importantly, the ruling would reaffirm Congress's constitutional authority over trade policy, preserving the balance of power between the legislative and executive branches. Lawmakers would regain their central role in shaping the nation's economic relationships, ensuring that major decisions reflect the will of the people and the interests of American businesses and workers. By setting clear limits on executive power, the Supreme Court would prevent future presidents from unilaterally reshaping trade policy. This safeguard would protect the stability of the U.S. economy and provide reassurance to allies and trading partners that American trade policy will remain consistent and transparent, regardless of changes in administration. Ultimately, the outcome would restore predictability and cooperation in global trade. With clear rules and renewed trust, businesses and governments could focus on innovation, growth, and shared prosperity, ushering in a new era of stability and opportunity for the world economy. The Supreme Court's decision will prompt global reactions. If upheld, countries like Canada and Mexico may retaliate with tariffs on U.S. goods. Major powers like China and the EU would likely respond forcefully, targeting key U.S. sectors. Brazil and India could impose high tariffs, pushing them towards new trade alliances. If blocked, nations would welcome the decision, seeking to resolve disputes diplomatically. The ruling would remove a major source of global economic friction. It would allow countries to rebuild trust and cooperation in trade relations. The decision will shape international economic strategies and alliances. The Supreme Court's decision on tariffs is more than just a legal matter. It's a pivotal moment that will ripple through the lives of millions of Americans, from everyday consumers to business owners and workers across the country. The outcome will set a precedent, shaping not only the current economic climate but also the future of U.S. trade policy for years to come. If the court upholds the tariffs, Americans could see the cost of everyday goods, from electronics to clothing and groceries, rise sharply. For families already feeling the pinch of inflation, these higher prices could mean making tough choices at the checkout counter, cutting back on essentials, or delaying important purchases. The impact would be felt most by those on fixed incomes and working-class households, who spend a larger share of their earnings on imported goods. For businesses, especially small and medium-sized enterprises that rely on imported materials or products, higher tariffs translate into increased costs. Some may be forced to pass these costs on to customers, while others could struggle to stay afloat, leading to layoffs, reduced hours, or even closures. The ripple effect could threaten jobs in manufacturing, retail, and logistics, putting entire communities at risk. On the other hand, if the tariffs are struck down, consumers would likely benefit from lower prices and greater purchasing power. Families could stretch their budgets further, enjoying more choices and better value at stores. This relief at the register could help boost consumer confidence and spending, which are vital drivers of economic growth. Businesses might also receive refunds on previously paid tariffs, injecting much-needed capital back into the economy. This could allow companies to invest in expansion, hire more workers, or offer better wages and benefits. The resulting economic stimulus could help both Main Street and Wall Street, supporting a broader recovery. Supporters of tariffs argue that these measures are necessary to protect American industries from unfair foreign competition, preserve domestic jobs, and strengthen national security. They believe that without such protections, critical sectors could be undermined, leading to long-term economic vulnerability. However, critics warn that tariffs often backfire, raising costs for everyone and sparking trade wars that hurt the broader economy. The Supreme Court's decision will influence the ongoing debate between protectionism and free trade, shaping how the U.S. engages with global markets. Lawmakers, business leaders, and international partners are all watching closely, knowing that the outcome could redefine America's role in the world economy. Ultimately, the ruling will help determine the direction of future trade policies, affecting everything from international supply chains to stock market performance and the health of local economies. The stakes are high, and the consequences will be far-reaching. As the nation awaits the court's verdict, American livelihoods, job security, and economic stability hang in the balance, making this a defining moment for the country's financial future. This case is about the future of presidential power. If upheld, it expands the president's ability to impose economic policies unilaterally. Future presidents could use emergency powers for sweeping trade actions. This shift would reduce Congress's role affecting trade policy stability. If struck down, it reaffirms Congress's authority, preserving constitutional balance. The decision will set a precedent for executive power in economic matters. It will influence how future presidents navigate trade and policy decisions. The ruling will redefine the presidency's role in shaping U.S. economic policy. The Supreme Court's decision will shape the global economy's future. If upheld, it signals a shift towards economic nationalism and protectionism. Countries may adopt similar policies, leading to a fragmented global economy. If struck down, it supports a stable, rules-based international system. The decision will influence global trade dynamics and international relations. It forces a choice between conflict and cooperation in global trade. The ruling will impact billions, shaping economic well-being worldwide. The world watches as the Supreme Court prepares to deliver its verdict.